And the question that I would like you all to respond to briefly, make sure that your responses are no more than 90 seconds, please. We have been told that we are living in a post-truth era, and we have been told that there is such a thing as alternative facts, for example. Do you believe that we live in a post-truth era at this time, and what does it mean to live in a post-truth era? Who would like to respond first? Oh, if anybody.
I'm happy to jump in and say, yes, we do. People get to choose what they want to see, and more people choose news as entertainment. And when you want to be entertained, you don't want to hear anything that disagrees with your views. So, yes, we're in a post-truth world. People choose what they want to see.
Okay. Let's take somebody remotely. Max? Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Do you believe we live in a post-truth era? And what does it mean to live in a post-truth era?
Well, in fact, in some respects, I believe that in a way or another, we have always lived in a post-truth era. I mean, I think that reliance on facts has never been the guiding, the main guiding principle for anybody's choices, which are very often indeed based on preconceived ideologies. And in fact, I like the fact that Alan talked about a lot about confirmation bias, because whether something is true is actually is to some people largely irrelevant, because people look for news items which confirm their own beliefs, and they don't believe in news which do not confirm their biases. So in a way, social media have perhaps foregrounded the post-truth era more than traditional media, I suppose.
Okay. Right. Thank you. Thank you. Let's see, Phil.
Well, I'm going to echo what you guys have said. On one hand, I agree with Max in the sense that there always been misinformation, as long as there has been communication. So that's nothing new. Fake news have always existed. Propaganda have always existed, including as weapons of war. And there's plenty of examples in history. Also, I don't think that people have all of a sudden become dumber. There's a lot of emphasis on news literacy. I think news literacy is really, really, really important. So please don't, don't think that I believe the opposite. On the other hand, I don't think that the current onslaught of misinformation is caused by a sudden decrease in literacy of humankind. So instead, what probably happens is that we are now using a new set of technologies to access news and information. That set of technologies is particularly vulnerable to abuse, and also it makes it extremely easy for people to put themselves in bubble, so that it's easier for them to please themselves, as you say, and to only be exposed to things that reinforce their beliefs. So there is a combination of these vulnerabilities of platforms that are probably right now causing maybe a spike in vulnerabilities, but I don't think that, I don't know if I'm ready to call it a new era.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. Asta, can you respond?
So I think on one hand, when we think about post-truth, it seems like there are multiple options, right? Or multiple outputs or multiple facts. So they seem to be very similar to this idea of democratic context where you have to choose and debate and engage. But I think there is a fundamental difference between the two. And I think this is where it's kind of, for me, it's hard to see this, and especially in the United States, that the post-truth is becoming more like a propaganda context where there is a lot of mistrust that is happening because of the post-truth situation. So I kind of see it as kind of a dangerous moment in some ways, where people think about post-truth as this. Anything can be the truth.
Thank you. I think since there was so much agreement in that response, that we do have.
Can I offer a rebuttal?
Yes.
Since we're in a post-truth world, you can believe whatever you want, and you will be right. You can say we are or we aren't.
What is the role of the university?
Yeah, why ask
What are
me?
we teaching? Why do we even talk to people?
Yeah.
Okay, the next question then. Should social media be regulated to counter misinformation? Why or why not? Alan?
I'll jump in. Yes. In the United States, we regulate paid speech. If you are an advertiser, there are regulations on what you can say and what you can't say. So it seems very clear to me that we should regulate paid speech on the internet, same rules that we have.
Okay. Let's see, somebody remote. Asta, would you like to respond?
So it's interesting to think about. I look at social media now, since I'm looking at news portals mostly. News portals have employed certain strategies over time how to handle comments. In some cases, they release comments later for very controversial content, or crowdsourcing efforts are take place, like when people can mark certain comments to be removed. So there might be some kind of ways of lessons learned from those environments. Or similarly, Wikipedia has shown a lot of these efforts how to deal with creating new content in a crowdsourcing context. Maybe something like that could be done for other places, but also there is a huge danger associated with that, because Russian trolls, for example, particularly the people who identify themselves as such, they want, for example, news portals to close down commenting section. And I see it as a huge danger because it creates almost this despotic element where only one point of view, or there are no point of view that are going to be expressed publicly. So I see it also as a dangerous thing.
Oh, good, thank you. Thank you, Phil.
I'm very torn because for every kind of, so my gut reaction is hell yeah. But for every kind of regulation that I can think of that sounds like a good idea, somebody has pointed out to me how that same regulation would be a really, really scary idea in some other part of the world. So I don't think that there are measures that necessarily work everywhere. Now, you were talking about the US. In the US, there is a very strong tendency to protect speech, so there are a few exceptions. You mentioned one. Another area in which perhaps there could be some room is media. I mean, platforms like to be considered as technology platforms rather than media platforms. And as such, they're not subject to certain regulations that apply to media, or at least self-regulation, but also some government regulations. And because they say we are not editorializing, we're just creating algorithms, and where people, anybody can see anything. But in reality, they are editorializing. I open my app, Apple News, Google News, whatever, and it decides what I see. So whether it's an algorithm or a human, the algorithm is designed by humans. And so they are, in some sense, editorializing. And so that's an area that I think we need to discuss and debate more. But in terms of more general, like government regulation, it's very scary. The line between what we would consider acceptable and all sorts of terrible things, from censorship to government control of media and all that stuff, is very, very blurry and very thin.
Okay, thank you. Max, should social media be regulated to counter misinformation?
Yes. Well, in fact, online misinformation seems to flourish on social media, which of course lack gatekeepers by their own nature. And then, of course, I mean, the key question that comes to mind is who is going to counter misinformation and on what principles? Because, I mean, for example, countering misinformation does not seem to be very high in the agenda of Facebook. So I think that's probably one question. And I agree with I can remember the name of the speaker just before me, who actually said that control of misinformation can actually touch on issues of freedom of speech, which I think are quite important as well. So it's a kind of contradictory issue for me. It's like I don't have a straightforward answer. It's probably difficult to have a straightforward answer in that sense.
One thing I want to point out about free speech is every Western democracy, every country in the world draws the line in a different place. There are things you can say in social media in other countries that would land you in jail in the United States. There are things you can do in the United States that would put you in jail in UK, Germany, France. So every country draws the line in a different place. So the idea that it's hard to regulate free speech, no, it isn't. Every country draws a line. And to me, we in the United States have drawn the line in a wrong spot. And we should learn lessons from our European colleagues or our colleagues in other Western democracies.
Thank you. If I may follow up to that, I think this is a good point because most of the social media, so all social media is basically crosses the boundaries of the geographical countries. So implementing it across it and having a unified sort of strategy becomes even more complicated. So I completely agree with that.
It's complicated. I'm not sure if I go as far as Massimiliano in saying that the platforms don't care at all. Whether they care for good reasons or just because of PR, they seem to invest some efforts. Facebook was mentioned. Facebook is trying lots of different things. They work with fact checkers, they crowdsource, they provide contextual information, they even demote information that is debunked by fact checkers. So there are some efforts. I'm not saying that they're perfect at all, and I agree that there seems to be a conflict between their financial interests and sometimes some kind of abuses that may occur. But things are moving, and I think that even platforms don't quite know how to move because, first of all, because it's hard because of different countries have different rules, and sometimes when they implement something that is okay for one country, then they are accused in another country. Like complying with the laws of China, for example, some platforms get a lot of trouble for a good reason. So I don't think it is an easy problem.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Yeah, I think personally that platforms have been slow to respond to the problems of abuses of various kinds, including misinformation. And I think that the ideology of absolute free speech that was part of the origins of the internet is still carried on, and that it becomes a way that any attempt to regulate can be shouted down on the grounds of slippery slope arguments. Like if you take this freedom away, if you take away our freedom to post this information, then you're going to take away all these other freedoms, which is the slippery slope argument that's often made. So it complicates things for